Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second week of classes. Today, we are going to be talking about social issues and what we can do to help people through education. So, we're going to do two kind of together but separate discussions today. One of them being about the history of family and consumer sciences, and the second being about these social issues that we're going to talk about. So I hope you are excited and along for the ride. The other thing we are going to do today is talk about your first assignment that is going to be due on Sunday, so on June 9th. And hopefully you guys have already kind of looked at it a little bit and contemplated what you want to do. So let's talk about the history of family and consumer sciences. I'm going to skip over that. So the starting points for family and consumer sciences are very varied, but it started in 1909 and was founded as home economics. So a lot of you probably know it as home economics and are probably interested in how we got from home economics to family and consumer sciences. Well, that happened in 1993 when we decided to change the name of the profession to reflect better what we were focusing on as in terms of family and things like that. We were no longer creating or educating people for just home life, so the name needed to change a little bit. So in 1909, we were founded as Home Economics. This emerged from thinkers interested in addressing a variety of problems resulting from the transition to an industrial society. So thinking about the books you've read or the literature that you read from that time period, there were a lot of things happening that created a situation where we needed to be more worried about safety and sanitation and things like that. So we were worried about filth, food quality, nutrition, and health. And labor, working conditions, wages, hours, and child labor, all of those go into that where we were transitioning from a farming society into a much more factory-based society, which I know here in West Texas, we really still do farm a lot, but we do have those factories. So thinking about our labor, working conditions, wages, hours, and child labor, when we were transitioning from farming to an industrialized society, one of the things we had to worry about was that child labor because people were having kids work in factories because they were tiny, and so they could get into those tiny spaces to fix machines that maybe adults could not get into. So we think about that in terms of how we can better the quality of life for all human beings. So we have two different foundations that family and consumer science has kind of started with. The Social and Reconstructionist Foundation, which is improving the quality of life for all people, which is our tagline here in the college, or one of them. And then the Critical Sciences Philosophical Perspective, which we will talk about more in the future. And this is what, whenever we think about like bettering someone's life, we talk about what the current situation is, what we want to change, and then how do we change it? And that is our critical sciences perspective. So this is our founder. Her name is Ellen Swallow Richards. And there's a video. If you will link to this PowerPoint, I will put it up for you in Blackboard. There's a video and you can learn all about history, her history. One of my favorite slash least favorite facts about her is that she did all the coursework to get a doctorate in chemistry from MIT. However, they would not award it to her because she was a special student because she was a woman. So they did not want the first doctorate in chemistry to go to a woman. So therefore, she never actually got those accolades. I think maybe she got them later, like posthumously. But at the time, doctorates were still so new that they did not want to give it to her. So watch this video to learn a little bit more about Ellen, and hopefully there's a whole lot of knowledge you can get. Go for it. Okay, so Our early beginnings of career and technical education and family and consumer sciences were really rooted in land-grant universities. So they were established in 1862 through the Morrill Act in order to give sons of farmers the ability to go to college. So as we know, in the 1860s, the college was not available for every student or most students at all. So we had to create, and it was expensive. It was generally speaking for white rich men. So we had to create a system where other people could have the privilege of going to college as well. So the land grant universities were established. Each university was given 30,000 acres in a certain space in a state. And it was considered the like state established school. So here in Texas, that is actually Texas A&M. It is mainly focused because these schools were land grant universities, they were mainly focused on agriculture, but they offered some of the first family and consumer sciences or home economics courses as well. So Texas A&M here in Texas is that land grant university. In other states, I know in Kentucky, it's the University of Kentucky. I'm originally from North Carolina, so I know that it's North Carolina State University in North Carolina. And these are some of the oldest universities usually in a state because they were established through this Land Grant Act. As states were created, they were also given that land, that 30,000 acres, in order to be able to establish land grant universities. So every state has a land grant university, and then some states in the South actually have two land grant universities. So in 1890, a second batch of land grant universities was established, and that was for the sons of farmers who were Black or African American, because they were not allowed to go to most universities because of, especially in the South, because of segregation. So here in Texas, that is Prairie View A&M University. And there's this line, it's really interesting. It's like this line across kind of the midsection of the United States, where those land grant, those 18, what we call the 1890 land grant universities exist, because it was very much a Southern thing to not let Black people into your colleges. So 1890 universities, then we have our 1862 universities way back then. So in establishing these universities and these colleges, we actually have the establishment of some of the first family and consumer sciences programs and the first kind of agriculture programs that were focused on figuring out how to help people. You'll notice that these universities are actually what oh, I just lost my brain. What extension is routed through. So we'll talk about in just a second how extension was established at these land grant universities. So from 1899 to 1909, you'll remember that 1909 is when family and consumer sciences, the profession was actually established. We had the Lake Placid conferences. So these were the conferences that actually people came and they debated about what the focus of home economics was going to be and what the name was even going to be and how we were going to help people. And what you'll see through this is that they even talked about teacher education standards and how they needed to be uniform across the board. So there was a lot of debate about the name, and they came up with a whole lot of different things that we could have called it, but they eventually landed on home economics as something to help everyone understand kind of what we were doing. So that's all the history I'm going to give you for now. I think that those are the really big things that you need to know. We'll talk a little bit about extension education in the future. And some of you may know what extension is already if you were in 4-H or if you went to some kind of extension programs, but we'll talk about it a little bit more in the future. So this week, we are going to be talking about social problems and why an educational opportunity arises, if there is such. We're going to talk about that within the community and within educational settings as well. So social problems are, sorry, I was reading the notes that I wrote a very long time ago, which have nothing to do with any of this. So let's go on and talk about social problems. So defining social problems is a real condition in society that causes physical, psychological, and environmental problems or harm. So these are the conditions that are prominent in our lives that cause our physical, psychological, and environmental harm. So I want you to stop for a second, get out a piece of paper, and think about things. Let's put them into these three buckets of things that cause you physical harm, things that cause you psychological problems, and things that cause you things that are environmental problems. And that could be environment like the earth or environment like your actual environment. Okay. So write down, I would say 3 to 4 examples for each of those, and pause here if you need to. Okay, so what do you think moving forward? Let's think about what are the most pressing social problems right now. Some examples on the screen in front of you. Maybe it's computers, maybe it's other kinds of technology. I know that there is a pressing social problem of thinking through not only Snapchat, but TikTok right now. And then also thinking through equality and respect for all people. I have students walking by because it is Red Raider orientation right now, so I apologize. So what are the most pressing social problems? Write that down on your piece of paper. And then let's think about what are some social problems that your major can help solve. So if you are a nutritionist, if you are a nutrition major, what is a social problem that you can actually help solve? Think through it. Pause if you need to. Answer these 2 questions on your piece of paper where you just put those other problems on there. All right, ready? Perfect. So on this slide, I want to know if some of these problems are the problems that you see in your own life and what we can do or need to do about them. So this is a Gallup poll from 2023, 2024, and you'll see that these date back. The data is from May to November of this last year. And it shows you what people are very worried about within the realm of things that are going through their head. So you'll see number 1 across the board is the economy in general. High cost of living or inflation is next. The federal budget deficit, unemployment, and the gap between the rich and the poor. These things are things that stay pretty consistent over time. And then those are our economic problems. And then if you pop down to the bottom, we see our non-economic problems. So we're really, really worried about the government or leadership, and that can be defined in a multitude of ways. I'm not sure how it's defined on here. Immigration is also one that we're very concerned about, but look at this. The number's actually gone down from April, March, and February of this year. So we're a little worried about that. We're worried about poverty, hunger, and homelessness. Abortion is one that is pretty common right now. The elections, unifying the country, ethics, all of these things. So this is just the short list of these things. And it actually there's more to it. So if you click on the link that's in the corner, you can see what people are most worried about in the country right now. So the question is, were any of these on your list of things that you are worried about that cause you either physical, emotional, or psychological environmental harm? Physical, psychological, environmental harm. So are these things that you can see falling into those buckets? So the economy, is that causing a psychological harm? Is it causing some economic harm? Not economic, my brain has stopped working today, guys. Environmental harm. So the economy, when we think about it, we think about things like, oh, I don't have as much money as I used to. The cost of things are going up higher. And because of that, maybe I buy clothes from a cheaper manufacturer like Shein or Temu, or is it Temu? I don't really know. Do we buy things from that? And then in that fast fashion, is that causing harm environmentally? If you haven't watched it, I actually watched a really interesting documentary last week about, it's called Brandy Hellville. It's about Brandy Melville, the fashion company, and then the rise of fast fashion and what's actually happening across the globe as we continue to consume more and more clothes. So watch that. It's I watched it on HBO Max, I think, but it might be available other places too. So it's called Brandy Hellville. It might be really interesting concept and thought for you guys in a way. All right. So thinking through this, are some of these things the things that you guys are worried about as well? So are you worried about the economy? Are you worried about the high cost of living? Are you worried about budget deficit and federal debt? Are you worried about unemployment? Are you worried about what's happening in the country? So the government or poor leadership, immigration. Are you worried about poverty or hunger and homelessness? So these things are the things that hold up being pretty universal as things that people are worrying about across the span of the United States. So here's another question for you. Would civilization be better off if the internet had never been created? Think about that concept. We thought about whether we want people to see our internet browsing history or inside of our brains. And I still contend I would rather them see my browsing history because it's pretty boring. But would civilization be better off if the internet had never been created? So when we're thinking about social concerns, we have to think about what we are interested in and how we're going to translate that into helping other people. So a great example of this is, oops, sorry, we're having issues today. Great example of this is a concern is small children not getting enough food to eat every day. How do we think about that? How do we reconcile that with ourselves when we are a nation of people who are consuming so much, but small children are still not getting enough to eat every day? So who and what do I need to educate about in order for someone to understand the issue? So we have to think about all of the possibilities of what is important for kids and what is important for adults to know in order to help in this situation. So we have lots of different options when we're thinking about kids not getting enough food. The first of them is poverty. So we think about, we need to educate about poverty and how poverty is changing lives and how the economy over here is affecting what we can eat. The second is food deserts. That mainly is supposed to have one S. I'm just now realizing this. But food deserts. Think about where you live and where the closest grocery store is to you. If you did not have a car, could you get there easily? Would it take you a while to walk there? I think about where I live, and I just live over in West Lubbock. Not even really west. I live by Lubbock Christian. I live by LCU. So thinking about what sorry, my brain just stopped again. It's moving itself, and I've never figured out how to fix this. So let's go forward and then backwards one, because now it'll stay. Okay, so when we think about poverty and we think about food deserts, a food desert is anything that is, if you live within, if it's more than a mile to the closest grocery store, or maybe 2 miles in an urban area, then you live in a food desert. And if it's more than 10 miles in a suburban area, you actually live in a food desert. So where I live, right by Lubbock Christian University, there is a grocery store, and it's within walking distance to my house, but it is a far walk. And that is the only grocery store around for kind of a pretty big circle. So technically I may live in a food desert because of that. So we also have barriers to access. So think about kids during the summer. They have a lot of barriers to access. Even if there are school nutrition programs that are giving them food during the summer, they may not be able to get to those nutrition programs because they are at home and their parents are at work. There's also shame in not being able to actually afford to buy the groceries that you may need to buy. And so maybe you are ashamed that not you, adults are ashamed that they are living paycheck to paycheck and don't want to get that help that may be needed. There are a whole lot of other things that are actually really important in thinking about what goes into kids not getting enough food. If we think about this on a more localized level for you guys, think about the university. Here at Texas Tech, we have some great food programs, but technically, some universities could be considered as being in a food desert because they have really convenient foods, but they don't have grocery stores that are really close to them. Think about the closest grocery store to campus. Where is that? There's a couple that you could think of, but you really need a car to get to any of them easily and be able to grocery shop. So there is the Food King that is over in Tech Terrace, and then we have the Walmart that's on Avenue Q. But if you think about like this other side of campus, there's not really a lot around us. So we've got a whole lot of things going on even here on campus. So let's talk a little bit more about poverty in general. So in these are the sorry. These are our current poverty thresholds for 2023. So these have just changed. They may have gone up just a little bit, but these are the poverty thresholds for 2023. So if a family's total money income pre-tax is less than the applicable threshold, then that family and every individual in it is considered in poverty. So let's look at these. One person, $14,580. If you make less than that pre-taxes, then you are considered to be in poverty. And there are lots of things that go into that. So look at that number for 4 people, $30,000 a year. So think about how much money you make. Think about how much your rent is. I will tell you, I'm not ashamed. My rent is almost $1,000 a month. If I was not making a lot of money, that would be really hard. But think about that in terms of these poverty levels. If your rent is $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. So that's almost half of what this poverty threshold is. So, and this is your pre-tax income. So for families or households with more than 8 people, we add a little over $5,000 for each additional person that is considered to be in poverty. So you'll see those 1992 numbers versus the 2023 numbers. So that is 31 years ago. That's a 31-year difference, and you can see how those numbers have not changed significantly, especially considering the cost of living right now and what housing is costing right now, even here in Lubbock. So here's some programs that use these guidelines in order to see if you are eligible for those programs. Head Start, low-income home energy assistance programs, parts of Medicaid, the CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance, SNAP, which is formerly food stamps, WIC, school breakfasts and lunch programs, all of those things take into consideration your pre-tax income in order to determine whether you are in poverty or not. Another thing that takes that into account is the poverty statistics. So in 2015, our official poverty rate was 13.5%. The poverty rate in 2021 was 11.6%. So we have a kind of downward trend, much like our unemployment. Unemployment's really low right now. But in 2020, look at this number. There were 37.2 million people in poverty. And that was because of what? The recession, the pandemic, all of it was happening during that time frame. And you can see the gray bars that are on this graph. The vertical gray bars are actually when recessions were happening. So we have approximately in 2020, 37.2 million people, which was 3.3 million more than in 2019. So that is a very good indicator that lots more people actually probably qualify for being in poverty than the poverty statistics say. So let's think about this problem. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, total non-farm payroll employment rose by 187,000 people in July of 2023. So the national unemployment rate is currently, this is for last year, it was 3.5% as of the end of July. Nationally, 5.8 million unemployed individuals. And it accounts for 19.9% of all unemployed persons. In Texas, that July number last year was 4.1%. So these are going back to July of 2023, but these are fairly consistent over time. So in January of 2020, here's where we get into what the pandemic did. In January of 2020, the unemployment rate was 3.5%. And in April 2020, it was 14.7%. So you can see how that drastically changed because lots of places laid people off. In Lubbock, the unemployment rate last July was 3.8%. So you can see on the whole, think about that in terms of actual people. So there are approximately 4 people for every 100 people that are actually eligible to be employed who are not employed. So here's some links that I want you to look at over and watch these videos over the course of this week. So we think about hunger and childhood hunger and why it is so prevalent, and then what we might be able to do about it. So how do we help families who may be in poverty and don't know where to get resources? We send them, we educate them, and we send them to the resources. That's how we help. And maybe that is education involving how to eat healthier on a budget. Maybe it's education on how to manage your finances better so that you can save money to get a vehicle, so that then you can go to the cheaper grocery stores, things like that. So when we think about addressing social problems, and we've identified a way to find those social problems, we have to justify them. So the first thing we're going to do is justify those problems by saying, yes, this is why this is a problem. Our programs should promote integrity and effectiveness while we're trying to justify them. So while we're creating them, we want to promote integrity and effectiveness. The next thing we want to do is do a problem analysis and needs assessment, which you guys are going to do. And then we're going to create a policy framework expressed in goals and objectives and select and implement an intervention or program. So an intervention is anything that is going to help change someone's mindset or behavior in terms of all of those things. We also want to calculate those resources that are needed and monitor and evaluate everything. So we're going to ask ourselves the following questions when we are thinking through how we're going to plan a program. The first of them is, what is the problem? The second is, what are the factors and causes? The third is, what are the characteristics of those who can be defined as having a problem? So that includes, what are their like physical characteristics, if we need those, what are their geographical location characteristics, all those kinds of things. How many people are affected? Can individuals be located geographically is the last one. So can we figure out how to find these people? So let's say we're looking at food deserts on universities. We would like to know how many people are affected. What are the characteristics of the people who can be defined as having the problem? So that problem, their characteristics may be they're 18 to 25, and on a college campus. And then can they be located geographically just means the space that they're in. So if we're talking about those food deserts on a college campus, most of the time they're going to be located on campus. All right, so when we're developing solutions, we want to, first of all, get rid of our personal assumptions. We have a lot of assumptions sometimes in that we are thinking through those prejudices, those biases, things we think about other people, just maybe by looking at them. I know one that is very prevalent right now is thinking that if someone is overweight, that they do not work out and that they do not care about their health, which is really not true at all. So we want to get rid of those personal assumptions, first of all. The second thing is we want to take time to truly understand the problem and why it's a problem, and what we can do to help. The solutions should then be seen as a series of related activities in that planning process. So the solutions should be baby steps towards helping with towards helping the solution. My words. I am so sorry. My brain stopped working today. So we also want to periodically assess our program to make sure that we are thinking through what really needs to be happening. And then we're going to utilize our critical science ideas, which we will talk about more in the future. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know. And we are now going to talk about your social issues video presentation. So you are going to choose a topic that is informative and educational. And it should be a topic that a lot of people could or would be interested in learning about. And it should be it should address a social problem or issue. So think again about what your pressing social problems or issues are. For me, one of them the last few years has been my student loans. That created some psychological harm in my brain. How do we educate people about student loans, about student loan debt, and how to get out of that student loan debt? So that topic may be something that's relevant for you. A lot of people, when we're talking about social issues, think about nutrition. Think about something that you know something about. So if it's how to eat healthier, how to retrain your brain, things like that. So we're going to choose a topic that is educational, informative, that you know something about and you think other people would like to learn about. So you're going to create a 5 to 8 minute video that educates about your problem. You're going to have an introduction, a justification, a call to action, and a closure. They're outlined more in your rubric, I think. Please ignore this due date because this is a PowerPoint from fall. Your due date is going to be June 9th, which is Sunday. So get ready. And then there's a rubric so you will know how, so you know how you will be graded. The other thing we're going to do is a peer reflection and evaluation. So make sure that you are teaching about something other people would be interested in. Okay, so that's all I have for today. And I know this is a really long video and I apologize for that. But we needed to get through that information in order to get to the next step. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I also apologize for the craziness of my life because we're just having a day, guys. All right, so for this week, you're going to do two things. Let me remind you of them. You are going to do a blog post about your first week's reading, which is just one chapter, and then you're going to make your video presentation 5 to 8 minutes. Please do not go over 8 minutes. 5 to 8 minutes about something that you are interested in that you think is a social problem that other people would be interested in learning about. So those are your tasks for the week, and then we will be back next week with some more learning. If you have any questions, please let me know and I will be happy to answer them, and then we can go from there. I hope you guys have a great week and we will see ya next week.